Big questions being raised about the government's response to the pandemic. As we've seen, the death toll figures rise and rise and rise. Yesterday, we were told the UK death toll has overtaken Italy's 29,427 deaths. That's more than the 29,315 in Italy. And we did it 2 weeks earlier than Italy did in terms of the pandemic taking a grip on the country. So has the government had the right policies or the wrong ones? Well, let's talk about all of this with someone who's been a very firm critic of this government throughout. Alastair Campbell, he's former Director of Communications for Tony Blair, of course. Good morning to you, Alastair.
Hi, Julia.
Hi. Look, before we go into the rights and wrongs of government policy and the death toll, let's talk about something which I'm sure you're going to regard as very, very flippant, but it is nevertheless the front page of many newspapers today, and that's the news that Professor Neil Ferguson, the man who was sort of the rock star epidemiologist throughout this pandemic, he's been leading the Imperial College advice, coming to SAGE, the organisation which is advising the government medical and scientific advice on the pandemic and how to tackle it. He was the man who said, look, we're going to lose 500,000 people if we don't go to lockdown. The lockdown was followed by the government. He, it turns out, was ignoring the lockdown rules, that he was actually inviting his married lover to his home, despite the rules actually banning that and forbidding it. What do you make of his decision to resign? Did he have to go?
I think in the sort of current climate, yes, but I do think that this is all of a piece with this general approach, both of government and media, to this thing. And I've written a piece today, 13,000-word analysis of how the government's been doing and how the media's been doing as well. And I do think, and you said in your introduction, Alastair Campbell's been critical, what a surprise. At the start, I was determined to be supportive, and indeed was broadly supportive, certainly what the government was trying to do, because this crisis was so off the scale hard. But I think it's reached the point where we just have to admit, and the government has to admit, they've made terrible mistakes. The strategy was not clear in the start. Then it was the wrong strategy, but they switched strategy effectively without saying so. And a lot of what we're now dealing with flows from terrible mistakes that were made back then. And I really do think, as I say in this piece today, I really do think they need to reset the strategy. And that can only happen, and I'm not out for some sort of great big gotcha moment, but they have to say, as Macron did in France, look, when this thing started, we got some things wrong. We apologise for that. We recognise that, we've not got everything right, and now here's what we need to do. Okay. Instead of which, they keep making the same sorts of mistakes.
Okay, let me just stop you there. So, look, the article you've written is, it's rather too long for me to have read the entire article while we've been on air. I'm sure you'll understand. But just looking at the main points you're making in it, the headline, it tells an awful lot. We are witnessing a national catastrophe, yet neither politicians nor the media seem willing to see it. There's no doubt at all, I think, that the government did get some things wrong. But there's criticism in every country of every government that they get things wrong. We know, as you say, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, faced a lot of criticism, an awful lot of criticism, obviously, of Donald Trump, criticism of the Italian, the Spanish governments, Chinese governments as well. Across the board, there is criticism. Why do you think that the media and politicians are ignoring things that are going wrong? I mean, certainly on my show, and I know on other radio and television shows and the newspapers, politicians and journalists of all sides are constantly questioning the government decisions. That people aren't just sort of cheerleading from the back and ignoring anything that's going wrong. When it comes to the issue of PPE, of testing, everyone has been questioning that, and quite rightly.
I think there has been an awful lot of cheerleading, and I'll give you some very specific examples. I mean, I go through in the piece, just to take one newspaper, The Sun, every single day that Boris Johnson was in hospital, his health led the paper. And I'm not saying the Prime Minister in hospital is not newsworthy, of course it is. But the fact is, I think it was used as a distraction from the fact that the death rate was rising and rising and rising. I think we've seen something similar with the birth of his son, where Boris Johnson famously quotes, "I never talk about my family," but he's been talking plenty, not least, and okay, I get the fact that he's probably very happy he's had a son and he's just escaped serious illness and so forth, but he's the Prime Minister. He's presiding over a national crisis. He has ducked and dived in terms of appearing in Parliament. He'll be there hopefully today for Prime Minister's questions. And I do think there's been too much cheerleading. And if
Alastair, seriously, you think that Boris Johnson and Carrie Symonds decided to get pregnant for her to go into labour, and for Boris Johnson to get sick?
I did not say that. What I said is that Boris Johnson serially tries to evade serious scrutiny. He has done it again and again.
He's not appeared. Alastair, I've let you have plenty of say. So when you speak, I'll listen. And if you could listen when I speak as well. We know the reasons why he has not been appearing at press conferences since they were begun. It was going to be, daily press conference. Boris Johnson would appear, not at all of them. It was always going to be the Health Secretary and others, Rishi Sunak and others. But we know he became ill. He couldn't appear at press conferences. Then he was so seriously ill he almost died in ICU. And then at PMQs. Last week, his son had just been born. He's going to appear today and he's going to be taking questions, but there's no question at all. We've had ample opportunity as members of the media and politicians to question the government, to question policy, to question the ministers in charge of specific policies. When haven't they been questioned?
Can I get a word in?
Do we have to go through this every time?
No, well, you do, because, Julia, you made your point. Ask the question and listen to the answer and don't twist my words.
I did not answer the question now instead of whinging and moaning. Come on, answer the question.
Julia, Boris Johnson, when he was Mayor of London, since he's been Prime Minister, he does not like serious scrutiny. That is the point I'm making. He has not, actually. He's done one briefing since he came back. He is going to Parliament today. Why do you think he's making this statement on Sunday? Why is he not, as the Speaker said yesterday, going to Parliament? Now, the bigger point, if I may, and can I make a point without you sort of, jumping in with some diversion? The main point I'm making is that neither government, and I'm afraid to say the whole of politics, I think, nor the media, is reflecting what is happening in our country with anything like the sense of urgency that there was when, for example, this was happening in Italy and Spain. And I'm afraid it is in large part because your profession is, I'm afraid, very, very pro-Johnson, pretty right-wing. The papers today, yes, it's a story that this scientist has done whatever he's done. Of course it's a story. The idea that it is the main story in the country today is utterly absurd. That's the point I'm making.
But it's not. No, it's not the main story. Look, I mean, most papers.
You mentioned the papers.
Yes, I mentioned the papers. It's not the lead in the Times. It's the lead in 3 newspapers, which also have been tackling all of the issues of PP and other issues. It is an interesting story. The man who's been behind the reasons why we need law. It is a relevant story when a member of the elite telling everyone else how to live.
We know what the story
decides that he doesn't want to obey the rules themselves. But this is the key thing. There has been a sense of urgency. There's a lot of concern. I mean, massive concern, particularly about the PPE and about the death toll and these international comparisons. But isn't it also the case that a lot of us, and I think a lot of us thought that the coronavirus pandemic would bring us all together. We've had some pretty nasty years since the Brexit referendum, and you and I have been on opposite sides throughout all of that. But actually, we all want as few people as possible to die in a pandemic. We all want the government to do well, whether we voted for this government or not, because that's about saving lives. It's life or death. However, we have seen in the last few weeks absolutely valid criticisms being made of the government. No question at all about that. I've been putting those questions to ministers myself every single day. But when we see some rather sort of dishonest headlines and dishonest claims about the UK death toll, not taking into account things like per capita comparisons, whether or not each country is actually counting the same number of deaths and others, that actually people begin to distrust a lot of those criticisms.
Well, people will make their own judgments in the round. Of course they will. But I think that, let me just say one thing. Dominic Raab yesterday saying that, we can't make these international comparisons. You can bet your life that if we had the fewest deaths in Europe, they would not be saying such a thing. And I do think, I was in government, working for the government for many, many years. And let me just give you one example the other day, when Matt Hancock did his 100,000 tests, okay. Yeah. If a Labour government, of which I was Director of Communications, had said that hurrah, hurrah, Oscar-winning ceremony, please, round of applause, please, we've cracked the 100,000 target. And it emerged literally as I was speaking that this included tens of thousands of tests that were effectively in the post had not been done. And that since then, every single day, we have not carried out 100,000 tests. We would never hear the end of it.
And there was plenty of criticism of that on the day and the day after. There was plenty of criticism.
There was very...
I don't know what media you're looking at.
I'm looking at the same media as you are, and I think, I'm afraid, it's just that you see it in a very different way because you've got very different views. I see tens of thousands of people dying. I hear a Prime Minister talking about apparent success. I see Matt Hancock day after day after day making the same promises as he made the day before, that everything's under control and it's being dealt with. And the point I'm making in this piece for the Tortoise is that until they admit how bad things are and reset, this is going to go from bad to worse.